It's already been thin, but the line between the Republican members of Congress and the domestic terrorists who stormed the Capitol at Trump's bidding on January 6th, but it only got more so this week when an anti-vaccine activist embraced by Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin went on the conspiracy theorist Alex Jones show and unsubtly encouraged the enormous conspiracy theory addicted audience to commit acts of violence. Now, the job of the soldiers during war is to arrest or kill the enemy, and this is what Ben Marble, who Johnson hosted at an anti-vaccine panel in the Russell Senate office building on January 24th. Well, first you have to know who the enemy is. Um, Basically, he's claiming that the enemies are Klaus Schwab, whoever the fuck that is, Bill Gates, George Soros, Dr. Anthony Fauci, President Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris. Now, the thing is, Marble is technically is basically he's supposed to be a medical doctor, which he obviously isn't. But his main job appears to be grifting gullible Trump sycophants by telling them he's got some formula to stay safe from COVID-19 without being vaccinated, which he does not. At Johnson's panel of anti-vaxxers, Marble was invited to hype up his website, where he peddles fake treatments like ivermectin to people that are dumb enough to reject the vaccine. Now the panel was just one of the more recent attempts by Johnson to basically push the inject bleach levels of the fake COVID-19 cures, but by putting a veneer of respectability on crepes like Marble, Johnson also wittingly or not is contributing to an increasingly dangerous atmosphere of political violence and domestic terrorism, and this is not an outlier, unfortunately. The anti-vaccination movement is increasingly being used by fascists and other authoritarian groups to radicalize every Republican voter. Enthusiasm for violence, unfortunately, goes hand in hand with the right-wing ideology, and for a very simple fucking reason. They know they can't get their way through peaceful means. So the majority of the public rejects these views, and so the only real way to win is to commit violence through force. Not surprisingly, the right-wing media and Trump himself are exploiting the Canadian trucker situation in Ottawa to inject more fantasies of political violence into the heads of their sycophants. The protest is ostensibly about vaccine mandates, but really it's much broader than that, as the vice journalist Mac Lamoureux explained on the Fever Dreams podcast. To sum it up, it's an anti-democracy movement of people who believe in a tiny fringe of far-right extremists should rule instead of the duly elected government. Basically, it's the same mentality that drove the January 6th Klan insurrection, which is why Trump and his sycophants see so much potential in using it to stoke more violence like the kind that Trump instigated at the Capitol. On faux, they've been doing everything they can to encourage the Ottawa trucker situation to happen in the U.S. because they're impressed by the way this unpopular fringe has held the city hostage. And Trump joined in over the weekend in an interview on the network saying, "You can push people so far in our country as a tinderbox do, but don't fucking kid yourself." He repeated the tinderbox language while fantasizing about the trucker blockade being replicated in the U.S., saying, "Our country, I think, is far more of a tinderbox than Canada." On faux, Sean Insanity engaged in the same violent fantasizing, threatening that if the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau sends law enforcement in there directly to confront them, we can't guarantee that at that point people won't defend themselves. Both Trump and Insanity are not really clever than Marble, but they are clever at adapting the passive language so that they can pretend that they're not pushing violence, when in fact that is what they're doing, and that this is a standard authoritarian rhetorical tactic. Pretending to be peaceful by trolling for a fight and then pretending your violence is mere self-defense. Of course, there is nothing peaceful about what Hannity and Trump are doing here. The truckers have been blocking traffic, honking horns at all hours of the night, and making life a living hell for the residents of Ottawa. And that's considered an act of aggression. And if they're arrested for it, they're not entitled. They're actually not entitled to shoot police in what they call self-defense. Certainly, actual practitioners of nonviolent protest know that, and if you get arrested for breaking the law, the point is to go peacefully to jail. Now, with Salon's Catherine Joyce reporting, Glenn Beck has also been engaging in this rhetoric, advancing a conspiracy theory that the unvaccinated are going to be put in re-education camps, which they're not. His guest conspiracy theorist, James Lindsay, declared it's coming for them, and they're going to lose all of their power. They're going to be exposed for crimes. And what crimes would that be, exactly? Except for the ones that were committed by the Republicans, and Donald Trump himself. Now, again, we see the same passive construction. It's coming for them, paired with the balance justifying conspiracy theory re-education camps that allows these propagandists to float the idea of violence while pretending not to have responsibility for it, even as they construct the justifications for why it's necessary. Now, not surprisingly, Fucker Carlson also joined in on his faux show in his usual way, pushing baseless conspiracy theories. On Tuesday, Carlson floated a claim that state intelligence agencies are behind the hacking of a site that the truckers are using to fund themselves, something that the site says they do not do. And on Wednesday, Carlson escalated, accusing the Washington Post of incitement to violence for a piece revealing the identities of Americans who have been given the truckers' money. Now, this sort of rhetoric, like insanity and Trump's, pretends that violence, but actually is the opposite. By framing the truckers and their supporters as victims of violence, Fucker Carlson is propping up a justification of actual violence as a mere self-defense, which it isn't. So far, there hasn't been much violence at the Ottawa blockade, but this doesn't mean that the threat isn't very real. Now, Canadian law enforcement exposed a plot from some of the protesters this week to use force against the police if any attempts were made to disrupt this blockade. And yes, it's absolutely true that if Foe succeeds in spreading this Canadian lie to the U.S. situation, it will likely get violent. And not because of Trump's passive language about the U.S. being a tinderbox, however, but because Trump and his sycophants have spent years nurturing the growth of far-right extremism groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, who were a big part of organizing the Klan insurrection on January 6th. Now, so far, the anti-vaccination movement in the U.S. has been more focused on dying than killing. And indeed, the unvaccinated people are 97% times more likely to die of COVID-19 than those who are vaccinated and boosted. Still, the fact that so many Americans are willing to risk death in order to stick it to Trump, and basically to stick it to Biden is alarming. Now, people who are willing to die for a cause, however idiotic they are often willing to commit violence to do it. Now, we saw that on January 6th, and the people who stoked the violence that day are now using anti-vaccine rhetoric to stoke this nonsense even further. So if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, REW King. And if you want to support my work even further, I have a Patreon link on my About section where you could help the channel even further by supporting my work. And, yeah.